Welcome to Gen Z Hoops, the Gen Z basketball, coaching, and sports business show. On this podcast, you'll learn from professional players, coaches, and executives from all over the world and see the court in a brand new way. And now, joining you courtside, your Gen Z host, John Hartofilis.
Coach Dave, how are you?
Good. Doing good, John.
Awesome. No, thank you so much for coming on the show. And obviously, right in the middle of the season and what's about to be for you guys, hopefully a deep playoff push. I really appreciate you taking the time and can't wait to kind of just jump into all the cool things you're up to. I mean, the first thing I want to ask you, though, and sure, I'm sure you definitely seen so much high-level basketball, but the passion definitely comes from somewhere. And I couldn't help but notice on your Twitter, you post every week, the hoop of the day, every single day. I'm curious maybe what that all came from and what made you think of start doing that.
You know what? That was just something that's kind of a fluke. It's about 4 years ago. I was with my daughter. We were somewhere and we saw a really cool hoop. And I don't do anything on social media except that. And so she said, you ought to post it as hoop of the day instead of, soup of the day. I said, okay. So we did it. And it's just something that kind of took off from there. But first thing in the morning, yeah, that's my contribution to social media. Hoop of the day.
It's everyone else, right? That's actually productive. When I saw it, I'm like, wow, okay, there's some backboards that are broken. I saw some Little Tykes backboards. Some of them,
and some of them people will send to me, and a lot of them I take on my travels. So if you got any, send them to me.
I've seen a few. When I went to Greece, I remember I saw a couple with that were in really bad shape. I know you'll love to see those.
Oh yeah,
it's definitely cool to see how you were able to appreciate that and obviously share that with the people that follow you.
Yeah, the 10 people that follow me, they get to see it every morning.
I'm sure they love it though. Definitely. But it's kind of on that same note, right? And thinking about maybe your early career, I'm kind of curious, right? Before you started coaching the NBA, maybe what that coaching path looked like and what got you so interested in it.
Well, first of all, I had never any intentions or visions of ever being, in the NBA. I was just a high school teacher and a high school coach right out of college. I started as a freshman coach and then a JV coach for a few years before I got my first varsity job as a head coach. So, and I was a classroom teacher in high school for what turned out to be 25 years. So most of my career was in high school. And then I spent a couple of years at junior college as an assistant, a year at a Division II as an assistant, my alma mater, and then spent 3 years at Fresno State. This was right when video coordinators were first starting. Matter of fact, it was so long ago. The computer video editing systems had just come out. We still did a lot of stuff on tape to tape. This was back in the early 2000s at Fresno State. So I spent 3 years there, really got into kind of player development stuff and was able to land a job with the Bulls. So I was in the player development role for 2 years with the Bulls, 6 years with the Clippers, and now I'm in my current role as a pro personnel scout for the Clippers. This is my 5th season doing that.
Of course, and I mean and you've definitely seen so much on the way. But I'm really curious about the high school stuff. I'm sure everyone always asks you about all these high-level players that you coach in the NBA, but I'm curious about the high school stuff. Me being a freshman coach now at 20 years old, kind of experiencing that. But then thank you. But then also just seeing how you're one of the very few. Number one, obviously, because it's the number of jobs in the NBA of high school coaches that are able to get to that level. I'm curious maybe what that'll look like for you and seeing such maybe good high school basketball or good high school coaching, and then transferring that into the league when you got that opportunity.
Well, first of all, my high school coaching wasn't very good. When I first started out, I didn't know anything about coaching. I made a lot of mistakes. Like everybody. But I was able to come across some really good high school coaches through Snow Valley basketball out here in California, and kind of when I really started to learn more and more about coaching and how to run a high school program. But at the end of the day, it still all comes down to fundamentals and basic stuff. Now with the social media and the ability to put so much stuff out there for players to see, that we just get away from how simple the game should be. I have a really good friend of mine, Mike Procopio, and he always says, dominate the simple. I think we kind of get away from the basics, and we see so much of this fancy, tricky stuff online. It always comes back to fundamentals, no matter if you're a high school kid or if you're an NBA player. If you can't shoot, pass, dribble, or guard the ball, you have a hard time playing.
Well, 100%. And you've obviously seen all that happen so many places, but I was curious what you said at the beginning when you spoke about how you made a lot of mistakes when you started. And I heard your interview with Basketball Immersion where you kind of outlined all the mistakes that coaches make. I mean, what's the biggest one that you were like, man, I can't believe I did that for such a long time and you finally corrected it?
I think taking a bad job. taking a bad job. And what I mean by that is, you don't have the support of the administration. You have unrealistic expectations from administrators and parents. There's no tradition at the school. There's no ability to build a pipeline up through the middle school and elementary school. And so I think one of the biggest mistakes coaches make is taking a bad job. With all my coaching knowledge and expertise, I'll turn it around. And saying that, there's sometimes where, you need a job and you have to take a job, even if it's a bad job, you need a job. Sometimes you have no choice. But I think that's one of the biggest mistakes coaches make is they don't investigate exactly what kind of a job it is.
Oh, super important to figure that out. And
that, there's a lot of other things, obviously, mistakes that I think are important, but that's right at the top of the list for sure.
So many. And one of them that I saw that you said that really stuck out was people just kind of talking too much, maybe, or just saying the word. Right. And I've had, it's funny. I've had other coaches come on the show and be like, "Don't be the guy that just yells, play defense." Like everyone knows that. Everyone kind of understands that. What did you kind of see happen? Maybe at the NBA level, I'd imagine, right? People are maybe a little bit more hesitant to talk, but I mean, I'm sure you still see it.
Especially for a young coach, is as soon as you can find out who it is you are and discover your personality, the better you're going to be. I see a lot of young coaches that spend, 4 or 5 years of their career just not knowing who they are and trying to be different personalities in their coaching. The sooner you can find out and be comfortable with who you are, there's all kinds of different personalities that we've seen, but you got to be who you are. And the quicker you can discover who that is, the better you're going to be. But the thing you mentioned about talking too much at practice, you go to a practice and you watch and the coach will stop and for 5 minutes give a lecture on whatever it is he's trying to correct when he could have done it in 10 seconds. I think we need to do a better job of teaching in quick bullet points, because there's nothing worse, and think back as you were a player, than, losing your sweat and stopping the flow of practice and, listening to the guy go on and on for 5 minutes about, how to get to a screen or whatever it is. So that's what I kind of meant by talking too much.
Oh, 100%. And I definitely see it happening all the time. But you mentioned something really key there in talking about how you have to find yourself as a coach. I'm curious, when did you find yourself as a coach? Was it right before the NBA job? Was it in the middle of all that high school stuff?
I probably still haven't yet. But in saying that, what I mean is we got to constantly be learning and growing as coaches. But I like finding your style and finding out what's comfortable for you. And, it took me 3 or 4 years before I kind of was comfortable with my style of coaching. I went through phases where I was the crazy guy, coaching every possession. We called it in the old school days, you had those video games, a video game coach, where you're coaching every possession. Some guys, that's their niche. I've seen coaches at the NBA level who almost coach like every pass, every defensive possession. That's just who they are. But that wasn't who I was. So I think the quicker you can figure out, maybe more importantly, of who you are is who you're not.
Definitely so important to think
I don't know
about
if that makes sense, but
it definitely does, because everyone kind of tries to maybe be someone they're not, but that's so important.
And most young people, they don't know who they are anyway in any endeavor that they're trying to get into.
Oh, of course, and definitely all this coaching, this knowledge. I'm sure you learned so much from all this trial and error leading up to I'm sure what everyone's really excited. What everyone asks you about all the time is that NBA job. How did you end up getting to the Bulls? What did that all look like? Obviously, a really fun young team at the time.
No, it was a fluke. It was nothing I pursued. I was working in the summers in Chicago for a guy named Tim Grover. He had a business called Attack Athletics, worked with NBA players mostly in the summertime. And I happened to be in Chicago when the Bulls video coordinator was a friend of mine. He called me and said, "Hey, look, they just hired a new coach and he's interviewing player development directors. Would you be interested?" And I said, "Sure," and it's nothing that I ever aspired to do, but, so I just got lucky and got hired. And so that was it. But it was nothing that I ever really aspired to be. All I wanted to do was really in California was I thought being a junior college coach in California would be great, because it's very competitive out here with the JUCOs. I played JUCO. I really loved the junior college thing out in California. That's all I kind of really wanted to do. But I just kind of ended up in this kind of as a fluke.
incredible kind of thinking about that story, right? And just not really chasing it, but obviously the passion was all around basketball, and it just sort of happened that way. It was actually also funny when you brought up Tim Grover. He has a company called Attack Athletics. Not like he was the trainer for the best player in the world or anything, or of all time, or anything like that. Just maybe one of the greatest trainer ever. We'll just say
I don't know if anybody, if your listeners know who he is, but he's just a terrific. First of all, he's very, very smart. If you've read his books and you followed him, you know what a bright guy he is. But he was kind of on the cutting edge of strength and conditioning for players. Michael went to him after getting beat up by the Pistons, and he searched out and he found Tim because he needed to get stronger. And it kind of went from there, from Michael to Kobe and Dwayne Wade and all of the guys that he's had. So he's great. In my opinion, at what he does, he's the best in the world.
You could say it works a little bit.
Yeah. And, it's not just strength and conditioning and stuff with him. The guy knows basketball. He played Division I basketball. He knows basketball. And the way he got guys to work. And the best thing about Tim was he always told them the truth. Always. He didn't care if it pissed him off, but he was always going to tell them as what he thought was the truth. It was a great experience just, working those few summers with him.
Oh, definitely. And then thinking about maybe transitioning to then your role with the Clippers when you first got there, was it kind of the same thing you're doing with the Bulls? Did things change up a little bit? I know the title was similar.
Well, what happened was the coach that hired me that I worked for, Vinny Del Negro, we got fired by the Bulls. And then right away, within a month, he was hired by the Clippers. And he basically called me and said, yeah, we're going to LA. I said, all right, let's go. After we got fired by the Bulls, I was going back to California to teach high school again. I was just going to go back and resume my teaching. And he gets hired, and we get hired by the Clippers. And we came, and that was the summer that Blake was his rookie year. He had sat out the previous year, but this is the first year that he really played. So we had basically Blake as a rookie and DeAndre Jordan as his second year. So we had some young players. And then we had some older guys too, like Baron Davis was kind of at the end of his career. Chris Kaman. I stayed there with 3 years for Vinny, and then in the same position 3 years with Doc.
So cool. And just I would imagine just seeing the progression of Lob City from the start.
Well, yeah, the progression. I mean, our first year we went 30 and 52. And then all of a sudden, this little guy named Chris Paul shows up, and we get a lot better. And ever since then, the Clippers have been very relevant. We've had some things that we had gone a little better in the playoffs, but we've been relevant, for sure, the last 9 or 10 years.
100%. I mean, put it in perspective, my entire lifetime, the Clippers have been good, if not great. I'm at championship contenders. For me being 20 years old, my entire lifetime watching basketball, I don't remember the days of the
Buffalo you don't Braves remember the 80s and 90s.
I don't remember that at all. And I mean,
playing at the sports arena, which is now demolished. So.
No, I mean, if my memory was erased, if in terms of like the history books, I never read anything, I'd be like, oh, the Clippers are pretty, Clippers and Lakers, like it's pretty up in the air. Obviously, those record books do exist. Without those, my generation, Gen Z, would look at things a little differently. But then you said how you were in that role for those 6 years, with those 3 years with Doc. Since then, obviously, there's been a whole change with going from Lob City now to where you guys have Kawhi and PG. A lot's kind of changed there. What's happened kind of with your role with the team?
Well, my role has changed that I'm no longer with the team on a day-by-day basis. I'm not part of the coaching staff anymore. I'm pretty much just report to the front office. First of all, we have the best owner in pro sports, in my opinion, and not just because of the wealth. There's many, many other things that make him, in my opinion, the best owner. And we have a great front office staff, Lawrence Frank, our GM and our assistant GMs. So that's kind of what my role is now, working under those guys, doing scouting and player evaluation at the NBA level. I don't do anything with college really. It's all NBA stuff.
So not traveling with the team. I'm guessing definitely watching a lot of film. It's funny, right?
Yeah, I'm watching again. I got every night it's like league pass, and during the day it's going back over the film and watching the games, and a lot of live scouting. Obviously this year has been difficult. We've been able to do some live scouting, but not like, in a normal year, probably 50% of our time is spent on the road, live scouting.
For sure. I definitely imagine the pandemic changed everyone's job, but especially for scouts. I've spoken to so many scouts in the past that have just said, like, my entire schedule is basically on a plane, right? Is traveling, is visiting all these arenas, is thinking, okay, I can hit this on this road trip. I can hit this team. This team's like only a 2-hour flight. So I'll do that one instead of the 4-hour flight. Kind of that's the whole game behind it. You said obviously not so much NCAA or anything like that. It's all maybe pro based. Do you kind of try to, in terms of in being a scout, maybe centered around maybe where the team is going, maybe trying to see the teams that the Clippers are maybe playing if you could? How does that really work out?
That's a different – see, that what you're talking about is an advanced scout. An advanced scout has to kind of stay 2 or 3 games ahead of the posse, and that's an X and O job.
Got it. Okay.
And he's working closely with the assistant coaches on, plays and play calls and strategy and all that stuff. A personnel scout is concerned and involved with personnel, who's playing well, what players fit with our team, with our coach, with our culture, and, trying to get intel on players. Just knowing the league is from a personnel standpoint, inside and out, as best you can, and using your contacts and your the people that around the league to help get information on players.
It's so interesting, and what you do is so cool, and you're doing it for a team, obviously, that's really fun to watch. That's maybe something's going right there where you guys are the best shooting team from 3 and from the free throw line ever. So there's obviously a lot going on there. And really, I can't wait to see it progress. Maybe the playoffs are a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and see that run go up, of course, much further than that. So, I mean, Coach Dave, I know you're definitely a lot of games to get to and to watch on League Pass. I mean, I got
a couple of them on right now. So
might be halftime now, but maybe they'll end soon or whatever it might be, and you have to get back to it. So thank you so much for joining the show. I definitely really appreciate taking the time mid-season to come on and talk about all the great things you're doing now, and hopefully what we can see in the future.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Gen Z Hoops. Make sure to follow, like, and subscribe on Instagram, LinkedIn, and all major social media platforms at Gen Z Hoops. You can tune in and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and every other podcast platform on the planet. Get ready for the next episode.